My name is Valerie Dunn, and at 32, I've been the silent backbone of my family's so-called success. For years, I poured tens of thousands of dollars into their dreams, lending money to my parents and my brother for his flashy real estate ventures. At first, it worked. They basked in the glow of new deals, fancy cars, and lavish dinners, all thanks to my loans. But the moment their bank accounts swelled, their gratitude vanished. My parents started dismissing me, saying I was just the tech girl who didn't understand family ambition. My brother, once desperate for my help, began acting like his success was all his own, brushing off my contributions like they were pocket change. I swallowed the hurt, kept wiring money, and stayed quiet, terrified they'd brand me selfish if I stopped. Every plea for repayment was met with excuses or cold silence, yet I clung to the hope that family meant loyalty. That hope shattered at a family party when my parents' voices cut through the crowd. "Get out. Nobody wants you here." Those words lit a fire in me, and my response left them speechless. What I did next changed everything, exposing their lies and forcing them to face the consequences of their betrayal. Want to know how I broke free from their grip and turned the tables? Subscribe now to follow my journey and see how one moment flipped my family's world upside down. Let me take you back to the party that changed my family that day. The air was crisp, the kind of fall evening that makes you pull your jacket a little tighter. I pulled into my parents' driveway in Madison, Wisconsin, my stomach already twisting with unease. Their suburban house was alive with chatter, the backyard transformed into a festive scene. Long tables draped in white cloth stretched across the garden, laden with platters of grilled steak corn on the cob and bowls of potato salad. Strings of fairy lights twinkled above, casting a warm glow over the guests, relatives, neighbors, and a few of my parents' old friends. I forced a smile weaving through the crowd, my sneakers sinking slightly into the soft grass. I was 32, a software engineer who'd always done my part for the family, but tonight I felt like an outsider in my own home. My brother Mark was holding court near the grill, his voice loud and confident as he bragged about his latest real estate deal. Closed another property last week, he boasted, flipping a burger with a flourish. Prime location, 6 figures, easy money. The crowd nodded impressed, and my parents beamed like he'd just won a Nobel Prize. My father clapped Mark on the shoulder, his face glowing with pride. "That's our boy," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. My mother chimed in, her voice dripping with admiration. "He's built an empire from nothing." I stood by the dessert table, picking at a cupcake, feeling the sting of their words. They hadn't mentioned me once. Not the money I'd lent Mark to kickstart his so-called empire, not the late nights I'd spent balancing their budgets. Then my mother turned to me, her smile fading. "Valerie, why can't you be more like your brother?" she said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the chatter. Heads turned, and I froze, the cupcake crumbling in my hand. "All you do is sit in front of a computer pushing papers around. You don't understand what it takes to build something real." My father nodded, his eyes cold. "Mark's out there, making things happen. What have you ever done for this family?" The words hit like a slap, and the crowd murmured, some chuckling awkwardly. I wanted to shrink into the ground, but then Mark stepped forward, a smirk playing on his lips. At 39, he carried himself like he owned the world, his tailored jacket and polished shoes screaming success. "You know, Val, my deals don't need your little tech job," Mark said, his tone mocking. "I made it big because I've got vision, not because of anything you did." My chest tightened. I'd lent him over $50,000, money he'd begged for when his first deal was about to collapse. I'd stayed up nights crunching numbers to keep his business afloat, but now he stood there erasing my role like it was nothing. The crowd laughed, egged on by his confidence, and I felt the heat rising in my face. I couldn't stay silent anymore. "Really, Mark," I said, my voice steady despite the shaking in my hands, "because last I checked, my loans kept your business from tanking." The laughter faltered and Mark's smirk wavered. I turned to the crowd, my heart pounding. I've been pouring money into this family for years, his deals, their bills, all of it. And this is what I get. My mother's face twisted with anger. You're just jealous, she snapped. You've always been jealous of your brother's success. My father stepped forward, his voice booming. Get out, Valerie. Nobody wants you here. The words echoed across the yard, and the crowd went silent, their eyes darting between us. The fairy lights seemed to dim the air heavy with tension. I could have crumbled. I could have begged for their approval like I'd done so many times before. But something snapped inside me. I straightened, looked my father dead in the eye, and said, All right, I'll leave. But the loans, the investments, you're on your own. My mother gasped, and Mark's face paled. The crowd stood frozen, the clink of glasses and hum of conversation gone. I turned my footsteps steady on the grass and walked to my car. The weight of their words lingered, but so did the fire in my chest. I wasn't their ATM anymore. That night, I drove away knowing I'd just lit a fuse that would unravel their perfect little world. By sunrise, my phone was flooded with messages as I sipped coffee at home. I'd barely slept, the sting of last night's party still raw. My father's text came first, a long, accusing message that filled my screen. Valerie, how could you humiliate us like that, he wrote. You're tearing this family apart by refusing to help. We raised you better than this. His words felt like a punch, blaming me for daring to stand up for myself. I stared at the screen, my coffee growing cold, wondering how he could twist my decision into betrayal. I didn't reply, but the knot in my stomach tightened. Then my phone buzzed again, this time with notifications from social media. Mark had posted a public rant, his words sharp and venomous. Some people can't handle their siblings' success, he wrote, tagging me so everyone could see. Valerie's too jealous to support her own family, turning her back on us when we need her most. I scrolled through the comments, my heart sinking as likes and shares piled up. Strangers called me petty and ungrateful, while old high school friends chimed in saying I'd always been stuck up. Mark's post painted me as the villain, erasing everything I'd done to keep his business afloat. Before I could process it, my phone rang. It was Mark's wife, Tara, her voice icy. Valerie. Do you realize how much you've hurt our family's reputation, she said. You're acting like a selfish child, dragging our name through the mud. I gripped the phone, my jaw tight, but stayed silent. Tara didn't wait for a response. She hung up, leaving her words to echo in my head. I'd met her only a few times, always at tense family gatherings, but her loyalty to Mark was unshakable. Her call felt like another attempt to guilt me into submission. The notifications kept coming. Mark's post had gone viral within our small Madison circle, and now distant relatives and former neighbors were piling on. One message from a family friend read, Valerie, I'm disappointed. Your parents don't deserve this. Another from a cousin I hadn't seen in years said, Why can't you just let it go? Each ping felt like a needle piercing the quiet of my morning. I wanted to scream, to tell them they didn't know the half of it, but I kept my composure, scrolling through the barrage of accusations. Then a text from my cousin Shane popped up. He'd been at the party, mostly glued to his phone, barely saying a word. Hey Val, he wrote, maybe you should just apologize to keep the peace. Family's supposed to stick together, you know. His words weren't cruel, but they stung all the same, assuming I was the one who needed to fix things. Shane had always been the neutral one, never picking sides, but his suggestion felt like another weight on my shoulders. I stared at his message, tempted to type a sharp reply, but I set my phone down instead. Responding would only drag me deeper into their game. The pressure was suffocating. My father's blame. Mark's public attack. Tara's cold accusations, and the flood of messages from people I barely knew, it all pressed down on me, urging me to cave, to apologize, to keep funding their lives. I could almost hear my mother's voice, though she hadn't texted yet, echoing the same guilt trips she'd used for years. Part of me wanted to give in to make the noise stop, but something stronger stirred inside. I wasn't the villain they were painting me to be. I'd given everything: my money, my time, my trust, and they'd thrown it back in my face. Sitting there, coffee forgotten, I made a choice. I wouldn't let their words break me. I wouldn't beg for their approval. Whatever they were hiding, whatever game they were playing, I was done being their pawn. A week later, I met my best friend Leslie at a bustling Madison cafe. The clatter of coffee cups and hum of conversation felt like a shield against the chaos of the past week. I slid into a booth across from Leslie, her warm smile a stark contrast to the cold messages still lighting up my phone. She leaned forward, her voice firm but kind. "Valerie, you can't let them bully you into backing down," she said. "You did the right thing standing up for yourself." Her words were a lifeline, pulling me out of the guilt that had been gnawing at me. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. Leslie sipped her latte, then lowered her voice. "I heard something odd from a coworker who knows your parents," she said. "They were at a charity event last month bragging about coming into a large sum of money out of nowhere." I frowned, the words catching me off guard. My father and mother weren't the type to have sudden windfalls unless they were hiding something. Leslie raised an eyebrow, reading my expression. "It didn't sound like a raise or a bonus," she added. "They were talking like it was a big, unexpected score." My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. I leaned back, stirring my coffee absently. A memory flickered: my parents' new flat-screen TV gleaming in their living room, bought just weeks after I'd lent them money for emergency repairs. Then there was their trip to Las Vegas last spring, complete with stories of fancy dinners and casino nights. They'd called it a well-deserved break, but I'd never questioned where the money came from. Now it felt like a puzzle piece clicking into place. Had they been spending beyond what I'd given them? And if so, how the thought sparked a deeper suspicion. Mark had been flashing cash: 2 new suits, a sleek watch, dinners at upscale restaurants. He'd claimed it was all from his real estate deals, but what if there was more to it? What if he and my parents were hiding a financial mess I didn't know about? I voiced the question aloud, and Leslie nodded, her expression serious. "Something's off, Val," she said. "If they're acting like you owe them, but they've got cash to burn, there's a story they're not telling." Leslie set her cup down, her tone shifting to practical. "You need to check your credit report," she urged. "If they've been using your name or your money in ways you don't know about, that's where you'll find the truth." The idea hit me like a jolt. I'd never considered that my family might have crossed that line, but Leslie's suggestion made sense. A credit report could reveal loans, accounts, or debts tied to my name, things I hadn't authorized. The thought made my stomach churn, but it also lit a spark of determination. If they were hiding something, I needed to know. I looked at Leslie, gratitude washing over me. Her advice wasn't just comfort, it was a roadmap. "You're right," I said, my voice steady for the first time all week. "I'm going to dig into this." Leslie reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "You've got this, Val," she said. "Whatever they're hiding, you're stronger than their lies." I nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. As we left the cafe, I made a mental note to pull my credit report that night. The weight of my family's accusations still lingered, but now I had a plan. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was taking control. Late one Wednesday night, I sat in my apartment combing through financial records. My laptop screen glowed with the credit report I'd pulled after Leslie's advice, and what I found made my blood run cold. A loan for $60,000 was listed under my name, dated 6 months ago, with my signature nowhere to be found. I stared at the numbers, my heart pounding. I'd never applied for that loan, never even heard of it. The lender's name, a small bank in Madison, stared back at me, undeniable proof that someone had used my identity. My hands trembled as I scrolled, the betrayal sinking in. My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my shock. It was a text from my grandmother Mildred, who'd been quiet since the party. "Valerie," she wrote, "I overheard your parents and Mark talking at the party about some gambling debts. I didn't want to worry you, but I think you should know." My stomach twisted. Gambling debts. Mildred was sharp, always catching whispers others missed, but this was a bombshell. I pictured her at the party sitting quietly with her iced tea listening as my father, mother, and Mark let something slip. The pieces were starting to fit together, and they weren't pretty. I called the bank the next morning, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside. The representative confirmed my worst fears. The loan was taken out using forged documents with my personal information but someone else's handwriting. "It's linked to your parents' address," she said, hesitating. "And a co-signer named Mark Ramsey. My brother Mark. My father. My mother." They'd gone behind my back, forging my name to cover their tracks. I thanked the representative, hung up, and sat in silence, the weight of their deception crushing me. I dug deeper, searching online for any trace of Mark's financial troubles. A few clicks led me to a local business forum where real estate agents traded gossip. One post caught my eye. "Mark Ramsey's deals are falling apart. Heard he's in deep with bookies owing big from poker games. My brother, the self-proclaimed real estate king, was drowning in gambling losses, his empire on the brink of collapse. The loans I'd given him weren't enough, so they'd used my name to borrow more, risking my future to save his." I grabbed my phone and texted Mark. "Explain the $60,000 loan in my name. Now." His reply came fast, too fast. "No idea what you're talking about, Val," he wrote. "Must be mom and dad, they handle the finances." His deflection was pathetic, shifting the blame to our parents like a coward. I could almost hear his smug tone, the same one he'd used at the party to dismiss me. But this time, I wasn't buying it. He knew exactly what he'd done, and so did they. I spent the next hour printing bank statements, saving screenshots, and organizing every shred of evidence. The forged loan documents, Mildred's text, the forum posts, it was all coming together. My family had built a house of cards, and I was about to knock it down. I wasn't just angry, I was focused. I needed to confront them face to face with proof they couldn't deny. This wasn't about revenge, it was about taking back my life. By the time I closed my laptop, my resolve was ironclad. I'd see them soon, and they'd answer for everything. A week later, I drove to my parents' house, gripping bank statements. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, the folder of evidence on the passenger seat a heavy reminder of what I was about to do. The quiet streets of Madison felt too calm for the storm brewing inside me. I parked in their driveway, took a deep breath, and walked to the front door, each step fueled by resolve. I wasn't here to beg or negotiate, I was here to confront the truth. My father opened the door, his face tightening at the sight of me. "Valerie," he said, his voice clipped. "What do you want?" I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, my mother standing in the living room, arms crossed. The air was thick with tension, the same room where they'd once thanked me for my help, now feeling like a battlefield. I set the folder on the coffee table, the loan documents on top. "Explain this," I said, pointing to the $60,000 loan in my name. "I didn't sign for it." "You did." My mother's eyes widened, but she recovered quickly. "We had to, Valerie," she said, her tone defensive. "Mark was in trouble and we needed to save him." "You wouldn't understand." My father nodded, stepping closer. "It was for the family's reputation," he added. "If Mark's business failed, we'd all look bad. We did what we had to do." Their words were a flimsy shield, and I saw right through it. They weren't protecting anyone but themselves. "Save him from what?" I pressed, my voice sharp. "His gambling debts, I know about the bookies, the poker games, the losses piling up." I opened the folder, spreading out bank statements and screenshots from the forum posts. "You forged my name to cover his mess, putting my future at risk. That's not family, that's betrayal." My father's face reddened, but my mother stepped forward, her voice rising. "How dare you accuse us?" she said. "We've always done everything for this family." Everything, I shot back. Like lying to me. Using my identity to hide Mark's failures, I pointed to the documents, my hands steady now. "You took $60,000 in my name without asking. That's not love. It's theft." My father tried to interrupt, but I held up a hand. "No, Dad. You don't get to talk your way out of this. I trusted you, and you used me." My mother's expression shifted to something softer, manipulative. "Valerie, please," she said, her voice trembling. "Family helps each other. You're supposed to support us, not tear us apart." My father chimed in, his tone heavy with guilt. "If you really cared, you'd help us fix this. We're your parents." Their words were a familiar tactic, one I'd fallen for too many times. But not today. I shook my head, my resolve unshaken. "I'm done being your safety net," I said. "I'm cutting contact and I'm reporting this loan fraud to the authorities." Their faces froze, the room silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. My mother's mouth opened, but no words came. My father took a step toward me, his voice low. "You'd turn on your own family?" he asked. I met his gaze, unflinching. "You turned on me first," I said. I gathered my papers, leaving the folder on the table. "You'll hear from the bank and the police. Don't contact me again." I walked out the door, clicking shut behind me. The weight of their betrayal still pressed on my heart, but as I drove away, a strange lightness settled in. I'd spent years carrying their burdens, but now I was free. The road ahead felt uncertain, but it was mine to choose. A month later, the house my parents cherished was boarded up. I drove by their Madison neighborhood, the once pristine lawn now overgrown, a foreclosure notice taped to the front door. The bank had seized the property after my father and mother failed to make payments on their loans, including the one they'd forged in my name. The sight of their home where I'd grown up reduced to an empty shell was both jarring and validating. Their financial house of cards had finally collapsed, just as I'd predicted when I walked away. Word spread quickly about my brother Mark's downfall. His real estate empire, built on borrowed money and gambling losses, had crumbled. He and his wife Tara had moved into a cramped rental apartment on the outskirts of town, a far cry from the lavish lifestyle they'd flaunted. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that Mark's creditors had come calling his debts to bookies and casinos, swallowing what little he had left. His bankruptcy filing was public record, now a stark reminder of the risks he'd taken with my trust. A letter arrived from Tara a few days later, her handwriting tight and angry. "Valerie, you've ruined our lives," she wrote. "Your selfishness destroyed everything we worked for." The accusation stung, but I set the letter aside, refusing to let her words pull me back into their drama. Tara had stood by Mark through every lie, and now she was paying the price for his choices. I didn't owe her an explanation or an apology. I folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer out of sight. My phone rang that evening, and my grandmother Mildred's voice brought a wave of comfort. "Valerie, you did what was right," she said, her tone warm but firm. "They thought they could use you forever, but you stood your ground." Mildred had always been my quiet ally, watching from the sidelines. Her support felt like a lifeline, reinforcing that I wasn't alone in seeing the truth. "You're stronger than they ever gave you credit for," she added. I smiled, grateful for her words, even as the pain of my family's betrayal lingered. A formal letter from the bank arrived soon after, confirming that the fraudulent loan in my name was under investigation. Authorities were looking into the forged documents, and I'd been cleared of liability. The news was a relief, but it also meant my parents and Mark would face legal consequences. I hadn't wanted it to come to this, but their choices had left me no other path. The investigation was out of my hands now, and I felt a strange calm knowing justice was taking its course. Then, unexpectedly, a text from my cousin Shane popped up. "Val, I owe you an apology," he wrote. "We were wrong to dismiss you. I see now how much they took from you." His words were simple but heavy, an acknowledgement of the family's pattern of sidelining me. Shane had stayed neutral for so long, but this admission showed he'd been watching, maybe even learning. I didn't respond, but his message settled something in me. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was proof that the truth was breaking through. The fallout wasn't easy to witness, but it solidified my choice to walk away. My family's collapse wasn't my doing. It was the inevitable result of their lies. I'd spent years propping them up, but now I was free to build my own future, unburdened by their expectations. 6 months later, I stood in my Madison apartment watching the sunset. The sky glowed orange, casting a warm light over my small, quiet space, a sanctuary I'd built for myself. For the first time in years, I felt unburdened, no longer tethered to my family's demands. I'd spent so long carrying their weight, but now my days were my own. I could breathe, plan, and dream without the shadow of their expectations. This freedom hard-won was worth every painful step it took to get here. I had blocked all contact from my father, mother, and brother Mark. Their numbers, emails, and social media accounts were silenced, and I'd changed my phone number to ensure they couldn't reach me. The decision wasn't easy. Cutting off family left an ache that lingered, but it was necessary. Their betrayal had shown me they'd never change, and I refused to let them drag me back into their chaos. My new number was a clean slate, a line drawn to protect my peace. At a work event last week, I ran into my best friend Leslie. The crowded room buzzed with colleagues, but her familiar laugh cut through the noise. She pulled me into a hug, her eyes bright with pride. "Val, you're glowing," she said, grinning. "Look at you, free and thriving." We stepped outside to catch up, and she listened as I shared how different life felt now. Leslie's joy was infectious, her support, a reminder that I had people who valued me for me, not for what I could give. We clinked glasses, toasting to my new chapter. I'd heard through a former neighbor that Mark was facing lawsuits over his gambling debts. His creditors had tracked him down, and court notices were piling up. My parents, meanwhile, had settled into a cheap rental apartment, a stark contrast to the home they'd lost. The news didn't bring me joy, but it didn't surprise me either. Their choices had led them here, just as mine had led me to freedom. I didn't dwell on their struggles. My focus was on moving forward, not looking back. Reflecting on everything, I realized the hardest but most vital lesson: setting boundaries is essential, even if it means walking away from family. For years, I'd let guilt and obligation chain me to their needs, but uncovering their lies, the forged loan, the hidden gambling showed me that protecting myself came first. Cutting them off wasn't selfish, it was survival. I learned that family isn't defined by blood but by respect, and those who exploit you don't deserve a place in your life. That truth, though painful, set me free. Thank you for staying with my story. It's been a long road from the weight of betrayal to the lightness of independence. Share your thoughts. What would you do? Your stories matter, and I'd love to hear how you faced your own challenges.